Hello there, and welcome. Well, today we're going to hit on a topic that I had planned to start the podcast with when John retired and we started our podcast, Pop Quiz MC. And it's lesson plans. So this is going to take me several weeks to get through on Tuesdays. So if you're not into lesson planning or planning of any kind, avoid me on Tuesdays. But the thing is, John and I discussed lesson plans really early in my career and relatively early in his. I was about maybe 4 years in to my teaching career, which meant John was maybe 15 years in. And so, and he went for 50. So I told him that my principal was expecting me to turn in lesson plans. And I was kind of complaining because it was a lot of work. But of course, I should write them. I knew I should write them. And John basically said, no, they're a waste of time. I never write lesson plans. And I went, what? I have always favored writing it down. And the truth is, I haven't planned anything since I retired a few years back. And I have been tremendously unproductive. Whereas I think as a teacher, I was very productive. So what's the difference? As a teacher, I planned things. I had things in mind, I planned them, and I got them finished. So, I want to start my lesson plan discussion with something that I think John had inculcated into his very soul, but didn't necessarily codify in writing. And that's the 3 elements that complete a plan and provide you with direction and purpose as you're working. So there are 3 main elements, and I'm going to try to do some interesting putting words up around me to go through this. The first element is your objectives. Of course, objectives are the things you're aiming at, your goals, your where you're headed is your objective. And I think you should think about both sublime and practical objectives. Sublime objectives refer to things that cannot really be tested in a useful way. Words like appreciate, enjoy, learn, think, comprehend, all of those are sublime words and necessary. We know that they're real because we love them. Think is one of our favorite words as teachers. Think about it, young people. But they're hard to test. However, practical objectives, things like pass a test, write an essay, participate in a discussion, do a presentation, those can all be observed and evaluated simply. So I really think that when you're designing your objectives for your course, class, unit, week, or even a day, it's nice to balance the sublime with the practical, and I lean pretty far toward the practical. Observable verbs. And I think that really served me well because whereas I'm a big fan of poetry and metaphor and the sublime things in the universe, I know that they elude the practicalities of evaluation. The second part of your plan should be your methods. Methods are the way you do things. I love to lecture, as my channel indicates. I love to give lectures, but that's not the only method that I used. And I think having methods is helpful. They help remind you of where your talents lie. Sue was less enamored of lectures than I was. She didn't enjoy lecturing the way I did. But her methods of direct engagement with students were absolutely flawless. They managed to pull things out of students that many of those students weren't even sure they could do. So how you plan to go about achieving your objective is important, and I think worth setting down at least in some sort of sketch. The final or third part of your lesson plan that you definitely need to get codified is evaluation. And evaluation has two prongs. One of the prongs is, how are you going to grade the students? What grade are they going to be able to get from this? Is it going to be a pass, fail, participation, no participation, or some sort of scaled evaluation? Is it going to be a test? Is it going to be a discussion? Is it going to be a piece of writing? Where is the evaluation? But there's a second evaluation you need to be concerned about, and that is, how are you going to evaluate the work you've done in this unit to see if it really does what you want it to do? That is actually quite useful, because if you can figure out where things go wrong in activities or units, or just your day-to-day, if you can figure out where you got derailed, you can actually plan for ways to resist that derailing. Students love lecturers because lecturers love the sound of their own voices. So students will sometimes kind of coax their lecturers to go on little tangents and rabbit trails in order to avoid getting their homework. They're evil in that way. But of course, if you're a good planner, and if you have your evaluations ready, then you can steer that little rabbit trail back into the mainstream, back onto the main track. And pretty soon, you're handing out an opportunity for students to perform. So, that's all I have today. Those three things, be thinking about it. I'm going to be thinking about it because I'm thinking, if I used objective methods and evaluation in my day-to-day life in some sort of form, I would be a more productive retiree at this moment. So I'm going to be experimenting with it again myself, and I hope you'll consider experimenting with it too. I hope you see me again real soon. You take care of yourselves, you gorgeous people.